imagine this scene. It's just after dawn, New Year's Eve, over in Senegal. There's a man, he's sitting at the U.S. Embassy, eating pizza. He looks relieved, maybe, but definitely exhausted.
Right.
He was just in a graveyard literally hours before in this tiny West African country, dressed in military gear, trying to overthrow a dictator.
Wow.
And then an FBI agent just looks at him and says, "You know this is a crime, right?" That's quite an opening.
Yeah, it sounds like something straight out of a spy movie, doesn't it? But this was absolutely real. Incredibly high stakes for this guy, Papa Fayal. One of the most unlikely figures in coup history, really.
Definitely. So welcome everyone to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving headfirst into the perilous, sometimes honestly bizarre world of coup d'etat.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to explore just how, while fragile a dictator's grip on power actually is, and the extreme length, sometimes almost ridiculous lengths they go to stop themselves from being overthrown.
Yeah, we've got some great sources here that really shine a light on, real-world attempts, the whole psychological chess match that goes on, and the consequences when it all goes wrong, which it often does.
So our mission for you today is really to unpack this complex dance between power, loyalty, and, well, betrayal.
Exactly. We'll dig into some surprising facts about how governments actually get toppled, and maybe even more importantly, how these tyrants try to secure their rule against the very people who are supposed to protect them. It's this fascinating paradox right at the heart of authoritarianism.
That image of Papa Fall, though, eating pizza after trying to overthrow a government, it's so vivid. Let's dig into that Gambian coup attempt first. Who was this dictator he was trying to take down? What made him such a target?
Right, so the dictator was Yahya Jammeh, a truly brutal figure, a megalomaniac, really. He'd been ruling the Gambia for 2 decades.
Yeah.
This is a guy who, pledged to rule for 1 billion years, claimed he could cure AIDS with his bare hands, and he cultivated this state of just absolute fear, mostly through his personal guard unit. They were called the Jungulars.
The Jungulars. Even the name sounds pretty chilling. What exactly were they do at? How did they create that fear?
Well, they were responsible for just horrifying stuff. Mock executions, beatings with metal pipes. Even, listen to this, burning plastic bags and dripping the molten plastic onto people's bodies.
Oh, that's sickening.
It really is. And that kind of terror, you'd think, how could anyone even think about resisting?
Yeah.
But somehow, even in that atmosphere, resistance found a way.
And that's where the story gets interesting with this unlikely pair. Tell us about Bankamana and Colonel Lemon-Sana.
Yeah, so Bankamana, he was an American Gambian human rights activist living in the U.S., and Colonel Lemon-Sana was a high-ranking soldier who Jammeh had actually kicked out of the country. They ended up meeting in Dakar in Senegal, and Sana, he'd been banished, he was determined, and he basically told Mana, I want to topple Jammeh, by force, if we have to.
Wow, that must have been a huge moment for Mana. A peaceful activist being asked to support violence. How did he square that?
Well, he apparently justified it using a quote from JFK, John F. Kennedy. Something like, you make violent revolution inevitable when you make peaceful revolution impossible. So in his mind, with all the torture and repression escalating back home, violence was maybe the only path left.
What's really amazing, though, given how serious this was, is who these plotters were. They weren't like seasoned revolutionaries.
No, not at all. That's the wild part. These were mostly, middle-aged guys, normal jobs.
Yeah.
Bankamana, who somehow ends up an international arms smuggler, right? He was planning bits of the coup on his breaks from his construction job.
No way.
Yeah. And get this, some of them apparently got close, started conspiring after playing Words with Friends online together.
Words with Friends. You're kidding. So how do you plan a coup with your online game buddies? What did the preparation actually look like?
Well, it was this total paradox, like incredibly detailed in some ways, but also completely chaotic.
Yeah.
They had this manila folder, right, marked top secret. Inside, annotated satellite images of the presidential compound. A detailed budget spreadsheet, too.
Yeah.
For 220,798 hours.
Specific.
Very specific. And it even noted, this is great, that .50 caliber sniper rifles were, quote, not really necessary, but could be very useful.
Useful, maybe necessary, maybe not.
Right. And meanwhile, Mana, the peaceful activist, is actually smuggling assault rifles in barrels across the Atlantic Ocean.
Incredible. So fast forward to December 30th, 2014. Sana, Papa Fall, 6 other guys, they're in this graveyard near the State House in the Gambia. What happened when they actually made their move?
Right. So they put on their vests, said a prayer, and apparently whispered, let's go take our country back. The plan was Team Alpha, led by Sana, hits the front. Team Bravo with Fahal secures the rear.
And they were counting on people inside joining them. Insiders.
Yeah, that was crucial. They hoped once the shooting started, sympathetic soldiers inside would flip. And initially, they actually had some success. Disarmed the guards at the first post.
Okay.
But then, a guard up in a tower spotted Team Alpha and opened fire. Santa was hit badly.
Oh, no.
And the whole thing just started to unravel fast. Team Bravo, they had one of those .50 caliber rifles, firing it kind of blindly. They realized pretty quickly it was over.
Yeah.
By sunrise, the coup had completely failed.
Why? Why did it fall apart so spectacularly?
Well, Mann put it pretty simply later. He said they didn't stand a chance. Jama's defenders, those jungulars we mentioned, their entire existence, their power, their privilege, it all came directly from him. They were Jama's creation.
Yeah.
They weren't about to switch sides for this ragtag group of unknown men, as Manda called them. They had absolutely everything to lose.
And the consequences for the plotters must have been awful.
Yeah. Oh, brutal. Absolutely brutal. 3 of the 8 men were shot dead right there. Then a huge wave of repression followed. Santa's elderly mother was jailed. One plotter's little girl, 7 years old, was harassed at school.
Horrible.
And Papa Fell, the guy we started with, eating pizza. He was kind of the lucky one.
The lucky.
Relatively speaking. The FBI stormed his house in Georgia at 4 a.m., arrested him for violating this old law, the 1794 Neutrality Act.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, it basically stops Americans attacking countries the U.S. is at peace with. He ended up getting 6 months in a medium security prison, which, compared to being executed or tortured in Gambia, was comparatively mild.
That whole story just perfectly illustrates the dictator's fundamental problem, doesn't it? What our sources call the catch-22. They seem perpetually stuck.
It's a massive paradox, yeah. Tyrants, they need a strong military right to fend off foreign enemies, internal rebels.
Yeah.
But if they make the military too strong, those same generals, those soldiers, they become powerful enough to overthrow the tyrant themselves.
Right. So a weak military means you're vulnerable from the outside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a strong military means you're potentially vulnerable from the inside. It's this constant, nerve-wracking tightrope walk.
So how do they even try to manage that? Before we get into their playbook, though, maybe let's just clarify what we actually mean by a coup, just so we're all on the same page.
Good point. Yeah, so technically a coup d'etat is defined as illegal and overt attempts by the military or other elites within the state apparatus to unseat the sitting executive.
Okay.
And this isn't exactly a new idea. I mean, the Bible mentions one. Elah, 4th king of Israel, gets overthrown by his commander, Zimri. Zimri then apparently holds the record for the shortest biblical reign, just 7 days, before he burns his own palace down around himself to avoid capture.
7 days. Wow. That is impressively short. So how common are coups, historically speaking, and where do they mostly happen?
Well, much more common than you might think, actually. There's research by political scientists, Jonathan Powell and Clayton Dine. They looked at 457 coup attempts over about 6 decades, found roughly half were successful.
Half? That's a high success rate.
It is surprisingly high, yeah. And geographically, it's really uneven. Africa, for instance, had about 169 coups in their data set. Compare that to Europe, which had only 12. That's over 14 times as many in Africa.
Huge difference. And has the frequency changed much over time? Are they becoming more or less common?
Interesting trends there. The peak was actually in the mid-1960s. Think Cold War context. Lots of unstable post-colonial governments, outside powers, sometimes meddling.
Right.
Now, while the number of attempts has gone down since the Cold War ended, the success rate actually went up for a while in the early 2000s. And we've seen a recent spate of them, haven't we? Gabon, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali. Mali's had, 3 in less than 10 years?
Yeah, it definitely feels like they're back in the news. Okay, so we know what a coup is, the history, but how do they actually succeed? What's the secret sauce?
Well, the sources really stress this idea. It's all about creating an impression of inevitability. Remember those Gambian plotters?
Yeah, they looked weak.
Exactly. And that perception doomed them. It's less about overwhelming force initially and more about making everyone believe you've already won or that you're definitely going to win.
So perception is key. How does that work in practice? Who are the key players?
Okay, yeah. Thinking about the players helps. First, you've got the perpetrators. These are the ones actually carrying out the coup. Military figures usually, maybe ex-soldiers, sometimes mercenaries. Their motives could be power, maybe righting what they see as an injustice, or sometimes plain old money.
And speaking of money, that brings us to Simon Mann, quite a character. Eton-educated Brit, former SAS officer, founded his own private military company.
Right.
And he planned to overthrow Teodoro Obiang in Equatorial Guinea, longest-serving non-royal leader in the world, re-elected with 97% of the vote, notorious for torture. So what was Mann's motivation?
Mostly, it seems, it was the oil money. Equatorial Guinea hit the jackpot with huge oil reserves discovered in '96. Its GDP per capita just exploded.
Yeah.
Went from under $1,600 in '95 to over $35,000 by 2008. That's higher than South Korea at the time.
Wow.
So Mann and his international investors, they were expecting massive payouts, millions, lucrative oil deals. He actually said pretty bluntly, I knew I would either make billions or end up getting shot. High stakes.
Sounds like a movie plot again. Man! Mercenaries, veterans from places like the Buffalo Battalion, notorious units. They're about to fly a Boeing 727 packed with weapons out of Zimbabwe. But reality wasn't quite the thriller he hoped for, was it?
No, it all fell apart right there at Harare International Airport. And the crazy thing is, the coup was basically doomed from the start. Both the Mugabe regime in Zimbabwe and the British government knew about the plot months beforehand.
Months, so it was compromised.
Completely. Mann ended up doing 4 years in a jail in Harare. That he was transferred, or kidnapped as he called it, to Equatorial Guinea's infamous Black Beach prison, sentenced to 34 years there.
Ouch. What did he say about getting caught? Any regrets?
Well, he had this darkly humorous line later. He said, you go tiger shooting and you sort of don't expect the tiger to win. It really underscores the risk, though. Failures are costly. Over 60% of coup conspirators end up executed or imprisoned if they fail.
Okay, so perpetrators are one group. Who else is involved?
Second group, the incumbent leader and their close allies. This is usually a small circle. Their main focus is just staying in power, keeping all the perks that come with it. And they know they have a very, very long way to fall if the coup succeeds.
Makes sense. And the third group?
This is the largest and often the most crucial group. The neutral soldiers, the men with guns, who aren't initially part of the plot or the inner circle. Let's imagine you're, say, a 27-year-old infantry officer. Call him John. Suddenly a coup kicks off.
Okay.
You're in command of your unit. You face this terrifying choice. Do I join the coup plotters or do I defend the current regime? Pick the wrong side, and the consequences for you and for your soldiers are likely disastrous.
And in that chaos, you'd have almost no reliable information, right? Just rumors, bits and pieces. So what's the smart move for Officer John?
Well, according to the experts, the safest bet for John is often to do nothing. At least not immediately.
Wait and see.
Exactly. Wait as long as possible. See who looks like they're winning. Once it becomes clear which side has the momentum, then John and his unit can jump on the bandwagon with the winners. That's why perception isn't just important, it becomes reality.
So a smart coup leader needs to project victory fast. How do they actually do that? What are the practical steps?
They typically go for points of high symbolic value, especially in the capital city. Things like airports, key government buildings, crucial broadcasters. Think the BBC in the UK context, maybe intelligence headquarters.
Right, control the narrative.
Precisely. Imagine trying to overthrow the government here in the UK. You might seize the BBC, force them to announce the new government is in charge, maybe shut down mobile networks, impose a curfew.
So even if you only physically control, say, a few blocks of London, a couple of buildings.
Yeah, even a tiny fraction. You create that impression of inevitability. People turn on the TV, they see your soldiers, they listen to the radio, they hear about the new authority, the old prime minister. Nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, the new regime looks strong, the old one looks weak.
And that's what convinces officers like our hypothetical John to either join the coup or, at the very least, not stand in its way.
Exactly. It shows how a relatively small, determined force can potentially topple a government, even without broad popular support, just by manipulating perception.
It's fascinating, though, that you mentioned earlier, coups aren't always super violent. Less than half involve anyone getting killed.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive, isn't it? There seems to be this general reluctance to shoot comrades. It's partly cultural, maybe within military structures, but also strategic open violence can strip away any claim to legitimacy the plotters might have.
Right. Defending the nation is one thing. Shooting your own colleagues to grab power.
Exactly. It doesn't look good. But this, paradoxically, can actually help cruel governments stay in power. If they can credibly signal that any attempt to overthrow them will be met with overwhelming, brutal force, It might deter potential plotters who are reluctant to start a bloodbath.
And this also connects to something called the coup trap, right? Where a history of coup makes future ones more likely.
Precisely. If coups have happened before in a country, it sort of normalizes them as a way to change power. It legitimizes future attempts. It becomes an ingrained pattern almost. Contrast that with, say, the UK again. No coup since Oliver Cromwell back in 1653.
Wow, that's over 120 years before the American Declaration of Independence.
Right. Those long-established norms against the military getting involved in politics are a really powerful barrier.
Okay, so knowing all this, what's a dictator to do? They know the military is this constant potential threat. How do they try to coup-proof their regime? You mentioned money alone isn't the answer.
Yeah, just throwing money at generals might seem like the obvious first step, but it can backfire. It makes them happy, sure, but it also makes them more powerful, potentially more capable of launching a coup.
And lots of coups start lower down the ranks anyway, right?
Exactly. Captains, majors, guys who don't benefit as much from the top-level corruption. And those junior officer coups, they succeed almost a third of the time. So bribery isn't a foolproof strategy.
So if showering generals with cash isn't the answer, what is in the dictator's coup-proofing playbook?
Well, our sources point to three main strategies. The first one is splitting the military. It's often called counterbalancing.
Counterbalancing. Okay, what does that involve?
The basic idea is to divide your security forces into multiple competing factions. So instead of one big unified military, you might have the regular army, plus a parallel military force, maybe a heavily armed presidential guard, perhaps multiple intelligence agencies that spy on each other as much as on enemies.
So you're intentionally creating rivalry, stopping any one group getting too strong.
That's the goal. You want potential plotters in, say, the regular army to think, okay, even if we moved, we'll face serious resistance for the presidential guard or the national militia.
So the parallel force doesn't necessarily have to win a civil war?
No, exactly. As one expert, James Quinlivan, put it, it just needs to be strong enough, loyal enough, and positioned correctly to engage and perhaps defeat any disloyal forces near the critical points, the palace, the capital, etc.
Saddam Hussein's Iraq seems like a classic example here. Didn't he call the army a pet tiger that needed its claws pulled?
He did. He systematically purged the regular army of any one suspect, replaced them with loyal Bear Party members, and then he built up parallel forces. The Popular Army, which was a huge party militia, and especially the Republican Guard, which was specifically tasked with protecting the regime. He made sure no single armed group could challenge him alone.
Okay, so splitting the military is strategy one. What's number two?
Strategy two is maybe more insidious. It's about reducing trust within the security apparatus.
How do they do that?
By constantly shuffling personnel and agencies around, moving commanders, changing reporting structures. This makes it incredibly difficult for individuals to build the relationships, the trust needed to conspire together.
Keep everyone off balance and slightly suspicious of each other.
Exactly. Dictators generally don't want their top security chiefs, defense minister, interior minister, intelligence head being buddies. They prefer them isolated, maybe even rivals, all competing for the leader's favor and reporting back on each other.
Yasser Arafat was apparently a master of this, extreme micromanagement.
Infamous for it. Pretty much every part of the Palestinian security setup reported directly to him. He was apparently signing off on checks for paramilitary units for tiny amounts, like $300.
Wow. That's keeping everyone on a very short leash.
And making sure nobody could coordinate without him knowing. Okay, so the third main strategy is making sure everyone is in the right place, geographically. Well, tyrants obviously want their most loyal forces stationed in or near the capital, close to the palace, government buildings, etc. But having too large a military force concentrated right in the capital can also be a risk.
Right, they could turn on you too.
So it's a balancing act. Some tyrants deliberately move units of the regular army further away from the capital, maybe towards the borders, and then they position their loyal, parallel forces between the regular army and themselves, like a buffer.
Is there a good example of that kind of strategic geography?
Saudi Arabia is often cited. It's a hereditary monarchy, faces external threats. They have three distinct forces: the regular Saudi Arabian armed forces, then the Saudi Arabian National Guard, which acts as a counterbalance, and then the Saudi Royal Regiment, which is purely for protecting the palace.
And how are they positioned?
Crucially, the National Guard is physically placed in locations between where the main armed forces are based and the royal family in Riyadh. The Royal Regiment is the last line of defense right there in the capital.
Clever. Okay, so those are the big structural strategies, but dictators also need to actively cultivate loyalty. Right. And fear. What's the carrot part of that?
The carrot is pretty straightforward. Spoil them rotten. Especially those parallel security forces, the presidential guards, the militias. Shower them with money, better equipment, the toys, better pay, better housing than the regular army, and often opportunities for personal enrichment through, well, corruption.
So they have a very clear stake in the regime's survival.
Absolutely. But if the carrot isn't enough, or alongside the carrot, there's the stick. And a big part of that involves identity and brutality.
Okay, tell me about that. Let's start with identity. You mentioned ethnic stacking.
Yeah, ethnic stacking. This is where leaders select soldiers, particularly for those loyal guard units, based on shared ethnic or tribal identity. The thinking is that these groups, often the leader's own group, feel they have the most to lose if the regime falls, so they'll be more loyal.
Does this actually work? Is there evidence for it?
Well, research by Kristen Harkness looked at Africa and found that about half of autocratic leaders used ethnic stacking, compared to only about a quarter of democratic leaders. And crucially, those autocrats who create and personally control co-ethnic paramilitary units, so stacking their loyal guards, they stayed in power for significantly longer. More than twice as long on average. Over 12 years compared to 6 for those who didn't.
Wow. So it does seem effective from the dictator's perspective.
It seems to create that bond, yeah. And it has historical roots, too. Colonial powers often did similar things, like the British martial race doctrine in India, or deliberately mixing ethnic groups in African colonial armies to prevent unity, while also being very reluctant to promote locals to officer ranks.
Okay, so ethnic stacking is one part of the stick. What's the other? Making alternatives dire.
Exactly. This is about making it basically impossible for soldiers in these key units to even consider switching sides, making their loyalty absolute because the alternative is unthinkable or fatal.
How do you achieve that?
By involving them in the regime's dirty work, making them complicit in brutality. Think about Saddam Hussein again, and his security forces' actions against the Kurds. Horrific human rights abuses, torture, mass killings.
Right.
There's a chilling account from 1991 when Kurdish forces overran the central security prison in Sulaymaniyah. All 300 of Saddam's secret police defending it were killed. One survivor of the torture chambers there said he wished the guards would come back to life so we could kill them again.
God.
When your forces have committed acts like that, under orders, their loyalty to the regime becomes almost unbreakable because they know if the regime falls, they face retribution. There's literally no turning back. Their loyalty has to be to the death.
So these coup-proofing strategies, splitting the military, eroding trust, placement, ethnic stacking, brutality, they sound pretty effective when fully cemented. Saddam's regime only fell to a massive external invasion, right?
Sure, exactly. But here's the kicker, the real paradox. While these strategies increase a regime's chances of survival once they're fully in place, the actual process of implementing them is incredibly dangerous for the tyrant.
Wait, how so? The transition period is risky.
Hugely risky. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's first leader after independence from Britain, is the textbook case study here.
Okay, what happened with Nkrumah?
Well, he got paranoid about his security, like many new leaders. He started doing all the things we've talked about, centralizing intelligence under his personal command, building up his presidential bodyguards, the POGR, president's own guard regiment, into a proper fighting force, giving them way better pay and equipment than the regular army.
So creating his loyal parallel force.
Yeah.
Check.
He also started promoting officers from his own ethnic group. Even though he'd previously spoken out against tribalism, he went after the police force, too. Consolidated political power. Ghana became a one-party state in '64. Nkrumah was president for life. Opponents jailed. He was ticking all the coup-proofing boxes.
Sounds like he was doing everything right from a dictator's point of view. So what went wrong?
The timing. In early 1966, Nkrumah went on a state visit to Vietnam and China. Big mistake.
Never leave the country.
Well, with him and key defense figures out, Colonel Emmanuel Kotoka, a regular army officer, saw his chance. He moved troops, linked up with paratroopers, and boom, quickly seized government buildings, the radio station.
What about Nkrumah's special guard, the POGR?
They did fight back. They were loyal, but they weren't strong enough yet. The regular army units involved in the coup overwhelmed them. By noon, the POGR had surrendered. Nkrumah was overthrown while he was airborne.
So the lesson is his coup-proofing backfired.
Precisely. It failed because it wasn't complete. By visibly building up his own loyal force, but before that force was strong enough to dominate, he actually gave the regular army and police an incentive to strike first, while they still could.
Because they saw the writing on the wall.
Exactly. The police commissioner who joined the coup explicitly said, Nkrumah creating a private army was a key reason they acted. It's the ultimate paradox. The very actions taken to prevent a coup can end up triggering one.
That's fascinating. So is there any other option for a dictator? What about getting another country to guarantee your security, a foreign guarantor? Could that work?
Theoretically, yes. If a powerful foreign state could promise to protect your regime, you could potentially weaken your own military without fearing either internal coups or external invasion.
That never happened.
There were instances during the Cold War. The French military sometimes intervened in its former African colonies. Famously, they reinstalled the president of Gabon, Léon Mba, after a coup in 1964. But it was a specific context.
Why isn't it more common? It sounds like a dream solution for a dictator.
Well, several reasons. First, it comes at a huge price in terms of sovereignty and independence. You become heavily dependent on your guarantor.
Right. You're not really in charge anymore.
Second, it's just rarely available. The guarantor needs the motive to intervene, the capability, and crucially, their troops need to be nearby, maybe already based in the country, and strong enough to quickly overwhelm any plotters. French paratroopers could handle Gabon's tiny 600-man army easily.
But intervening in a larger country today
would be incredibly risky and costly for the guarantor. Imagine a foreign power trying to prop up a dictator in, say, Egypt today against a coup. As one source puts it, their troops would likely come home in coffins. Huge reputational damage, too.
So realistically, most tyrants are on their own. They have to manage their own military threat.
Pretty much. And what we've seen is that the military is this constant, potent threat. So tyrants instinctively tried to divide, weaken, and control it through these coup-proofing measures.
But we saw the paradox with Nkrumah, and there's another potential downside, isn't there? If you successfully fragment your military, make it clear it's designed for internal repression, not real fighting.
Right. Then you create a new vulnerability. Your fragmented, coup-proofed military might look weak to outsiders, or even to rebels within your own country, maybe operating out in the provinces, the hinterland.
So preventing a coup from the capital might invite a different kind of threat.
It could. Suddenly, that rebel commander gathering strength out in the regions might think, you know what? The army in the capital's divided, focused inwards. Maybe we can make a run for it. And before the tyrant knows it, a different kind of challenger is marching towards the palace gates.
It really makes you think. Given all these incredible lengths dictators go to, the risks involved in coup-proofing, the paradoxes where it can backfire, what does security even mean for these rulers?
That's the question, isn't it? Can a ruler who fundamentally distrusts the very forces meant to protect them ever achieve true stability? Or is it just a constant, dangerous game of managing threats?
And what does that constant instability tell us about the nature of power itself when it's held that way?